Welcome back to my lovely IHP community. We have our Monday video, and I chose to re-record it because I actually got a couple of things not concluded in the one that it's a really great one. So I'm a little bit like, but it's okay. First of all, let me begin with I always will probably do this. Anybody who's new, I'm used to not always closing all the loops because I give food for thought. And there are educational points that I will mention. So if you ever find that I haven't concluded something, write me a note and tell me the timestamp, and I'll make sure to address it and respond in an email. But let me therefore begin with what I realized I mixed up, and then I'll try and reorganize the thoughts. Our nervous system was one of the areas I was looking at. It has three ways that, when I've learned about it from the polyvagal theory, Stephen Porges, doctor, or even when hearing about it from all the trauma experts from NICABM, or in my Somatopia trauma educational course, or in somatics with the Awakened Embodied certificate course with embodied philosophy. Again, everywhere in any one of the courses on trauma and somatics that I have been taken and that I've completed, three main ways our nervous system will respond. And this was uncovered, if I remember correctly, in 1950 and then 1970. But fight and flight, it's the sympathetic. And then the freeze would be the dorsal vagal part of the parasympathetic. That third is our social engagement, which is ventral vagal in the parasympathetic. So when we're breathing in and out, rhythmic breathing regulates the nervous system. And I want to spell these things out so I don't have to mess them up again. And the breathing in, sympathetic, breathing out, parasympathetic, which is rest and ease. Now, these data points, I'm sharing them because essentially for my 5D mystics and anyone who's moving into the potentially enlightenment soul age group or a functional adult of themselves, it does mean you're moving into a restorative embodied self and an integrated mind easily. The ones who stick to a specific manner of life that does not get discussed by all yet, with bringing together the human elements, the spiritual, which metaphysics, esotericism, I put astrology, tarot, akashic, record readings, all the spiritual is in the middle. And when I say spirituality, I'm thinking of Sadhguru and yoga, the yoga sciences, but specifically from Sadhguru is who I've learned about the true spirituality, which is equal to expansion of consciousness. I bring the human element. And so this three mode, sympathetic, parasympathetic, with a either dorsal vagal, which is shut down, or a ventral vagal. That's what I am trying to get to. And a restorative embodied self person is able to stay online with their integrated mind with a default mode network that has an others and the self, OATS, that isn't scanning to say, am I safe to socially engage or not? Which is instead what the chatter brain, when they say sit in silence, the spirituality or spiritual folk, what they should specify is it's you being able to participate from your mind and your body. So if you and I are in a room, you're comfortable to be still with me. And when that is optimal, we're laughing together, we're safe together. You're being accepted for who you are. I'm being accepted for who I am. And this is called also attunement. Now, an integrated mind is very important to mention. This is the other data point that I got mixed up, because once I start going, I just start talking about things. So when your mind is integrated, it works with the right and left equally. And it really, the way Daniel Siegel presents it, it's all hands on deck. And the default mode network falls away. It's basically silent. So while a Sadhguru, when he teaches his inner engineering, when I did his Shambhavi Kriya, when I did his Yoga of Grace, and by the way, I got an email recently that says he has decided, or he is doing his last in-person inner engineering. And he had mentioned this when I first came across him. He mentioned that he would be allowing a certain amount of time before. I'm not sure if he's going to close himself off from the community. I don't know what his plans are, but he made it clear that there's only a certain amount of time that he would be making himself accessible. And that makes sense for where we're at. There's many different videos that I've seen where he also shares the science and spirituality coming together, which is in fact where we are. So when you get good educators, they are the ones who are open to new information, and they will present to you their findings with a degree of awareness of where their colleagues agree, where their colleagues don't agree, and where there's room for growth, because information is always building. Any individual, independently from their title and their level of degrees. I have a master's, and I don't think people have to have any degree to be intellectually flexible, adaptive, coherent, energized, and stable. Their integrated mind is a choice. So let me go back before I forget. An integrated mind is of a 5D mystic, of an enlightenment soul age group person. And this is an individual who, if they are engaging with any other person or a group, is leading with a heart that is in a state of compassion, because of recognizing, humanly speaking, that all people are either going to be around each other in a comfortable way, or if not, they're not in a state of this default mode network chattering away and scanning the surrounding based on an us versus them group or something like that. So, integrated mind of a person who is a 5D mystic in the Enlightenment Soul Age group, which is the community that I get to talk to, because with glares, which are things that I know the physicists can explain, I just haven't gained enough intel myself to be able to use that wording in order to accompany when I'm channeling guidance or when I am reading tarot, but I can explain the feeling, because this is where the field of consciousness, while those who remain in only part of their belief system, the other soul age groups and people overall, once they identify with information, they clearly only choose to use verbiage, and then they also shut down learning, and they just go one way. And here's where some of us don't go one way, and I bring together, to the best of my ability, the different ways that all subject matters can explain why, when we are relating to this field of energy, we can channel guidance or provide consultation through tarot, and it isn't based on supernatural being entities that are alive, as well as we don't discredit those who have experiences. This is the point. So 5D, though, are people who are in oneness consciousness or want to move into this space, and that would be tapping into your infinite higher human consciousness potential, which disengages from the narratives of a 4D, 3D community and or of just one set of schools of thought. You don't do just one way. You don't say, oh, just what Freud said from yesterday and Jung and that and da-da-da is valid. And all these people that are talking about the importance of emotions and the importance of the body are not. A person who does that in the book of Who Loves Learning, in a book of me, and anyone who wants to say, I love knowledge, if you're listening to someone who is presenting to you in a rigid format knowledge, you're not realizing that that rigidity is an ego. That rigidity is an opinion. If you're rigid with knowledge, you're not independent with it, which means knowledge is not set in stone. This is an equation of, to me, a mind that is grounded, and there can't be this open-minded to where it falls somewhere with knowledge. The way we stay rational is by making sure that outside a system is working. And I would say that every country seems to have systems that are rearranging because they know that there's areas that are not working. I don't see anyone falling out in a way of there being aspects that actually, when you look at our, again, human history, there are moments of destabilization that really are rearranging. So they're only destabilized because there's new types of identities, there's new types of information. And here's where transformation actually happens with the dismantling of something that is no longer working. The people who feel agitated, the ones who have a non-integrated mind, they go rigid. So there are those who have titles and they present themselves, and the ones who follow those leaders, they have a us group versus them group, and you can always tell because they're refuting new pieces of information through their cognitive dissonance approach or confirmation bias. So they'll present to you their linearity. A human being who has a flexible, adaptive, coherent, energized, and stable mind will very easily, with compassion, be able to attune, because we will not only read their nonverbal cues, which will be a rigid rock, and their mannerisms as well will be immediately something we'll be aware of. We will take steps back, create a safe environment for us and those involved, and will not agitate what is obviously an indication of a body that is in sympathetic, nowhere near ventral vagal, otherwise they'd be speaking in a very easy and soft body and with a little bit more respect to the person in front of them versus thinking they know everything, which nobody does. So a smart human being, which would be stable, mature, adaptive, rational, and teachable, will learn how to take steps back, allow safety to be the first priority, disengage from a rigid format of a closed-minded human being, and move away. Now, what we like more, though, are the educators who are open to presenting their data with respect to each other, and also where there has not been found enough data yet to say so specifically, which is one of the things I love most about Daniel Siegel when I'm learning about the mind in interpersonal neurobiology. So the non-integrated mind, which would be a person who actually doesn't have the ability to manage their implicit memory, which is the unresolved trauma that comes up. So those 3 ways that our nervous system responds to life, and then the default mode network and the OATs, the others in the self that's scanning. Can I turn my social engagement system on or not? Here's where modulated or dysregulated bodies will not be in a ventral vagal. They will not be in a state of compassion. They will not be in a state of softness. They will not be open to the interactions between science and spirituality or the middle. They're the ones who will be in my sympathetic, my fight flight, my agitation will begin to arise, and it will be presented in my tone and in my mannerisms and every inch of a person. So here's where when people in their limbic system are not interested in each other's emotional well-being, they're not going to be interested in attuning in a way that creates a safe environment. They're too busy being only in their left mode in the absence of awareness of how their temperature is rising, and that's because they're not caring about how do I want to interact with a human being in front of me, because their default mode network essentially has decided I'm not safe. Now, there's a lot of things that I could discuss, which we won't discuss right now, but that a 5D mystic and an enlightenment soul age person, you will not be in temperature. You will be the one, as I, who will always be inclined to create that safe environment. So the people who are instead in their sympathetic or their dorsal vagal, if you will, they will have what is not awareness of the implicit stuff coming up. The corpus callosum is actually impaired in its growth when there's a non-integrated mind, and so when there's unresolved trauma, there's an impaired growth of, I believe it was the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex. There is also an impairment to the interconnected connectome and the way that it interconnects, and these are aspects that are part of your physiological brain, and it's an indication of a person who will be more of a adaptive child, unforgiving, harsh, people who do cognitive dissonance and confirmation bias and are in a temperature that they will justify. And one of the examples is, no, I don't have a tone. You're just being a dumb idiot and you're making me upset. And I'm right and you're wrong. And I have a right to get angry at you and start yelling at you or insulting you. it all depends. So, I mean, I, for one, have had plenty of experiences. And one of them, for example, was describing to a person how I'm able to handle my own panic attacks and then beginning to actually get angry and begin to get agitated, where I didn't know about the non-integrated mind, but I definitely knew that that person had no reason physically towards me to be doing that. But I did understand, humanly speaking, that's a stress response. And I now know it's because the implicit memory for that person, as I expressed panic attack, their mind went to when they have it, which is a helpless state, which is why their emotions just rose up in a way that their body's defending them from that memory. And so here's where difference with an integrated mind, and I will use me as the example. And I love embracing human, spiritual, and spirituality. They're not a competition. They're called pieces of information, and it's very easy to maintain a clear mind, because an open mind and an open heart and an open body, basically to information, I should specify, is something where we're not competing. That's what true self-empowerment, by the way, is where if you're telling me your opinion, it doesn't matter how many lists of things you want to present to me, a mind that is integrated and a body that is confident in the fact that I'm a human and you're a human, and you better bet that there's so much information out there that even if someone wanted to tell me they knew everything, I don't think we'd have enough time in my lifetime right now for them to even tell me everything they knew, which would, by the way, tell me you don't know everything. Like, it's pretty much, I'm not going to say impossible. Anything's possible, but when you're having a conversation with a person, the part of people actually being able to understand that it's a subjective discourse, and if you really care about the world, you're not going to be spending it talking to a person. You're going to be spending time participating with the institutions in order to create a world where everyone can feel safe. So you're not going to be trying to pick a fight on new information and prove your point. Proving a point indicates you don't actually have proof of your own point, and you're trying to create a visibility of it, which is fine, and I'm sure that that's actually something that can take place. You're going to need a crowd to prove it to, and you know, this is where that's a focus. It's an ego focus, which makes sense for those who have a need to be heard, to be seen, to be validated. And that is part of that mammalian heritage. So when the 5D person, the Enlightenment Soul Ager person, allows space for someone to voice, even with their implicit memory stuff, it's because we care about the emotional and mental well-being of those that are around us. And we're not having to prove that we're right or wrong or, you know, any of that. So it's a softness, because compassion leads the way from within, because another person is not a danger just because they're getting a bit more agitated than is in the norm. Cognitive dissonance and confirmation bias are very typical. In fact, here's again, a 5D mystic will not be engaging in a spit spat with somebody, because that's just not very 5D like. It's not an integrated mind or a restorative embodied self. You don't need to have done yoga in order to learn how to engage in your social engagement system and have the default mode network silenced. This is actually a choice that comes from love, and with the thinking brain as you interact with another person is, do I care about a person's emotional well-being while I'm interacting with them? So temperature. When we have temperature, I have still a very not good calm temperature within my household, particularly with my mother. But see, this is where that 2-year-old comes out very loud and clear. So she's patient with me, I'm patient with me. That is implicit memory, where you're in a tone and you're getting agitated. And there's just so many different ways that people who want to move into their functional adulthood and grow relationships in a let's create safety for each other, let's work with secure attachment. All of this is something that's accessible. Yoga is a portfolio of exercises that supports ventral vagal toning. Your relationships are what support you to, if you choose that all your relationships are important and that your loved one's emotions are important, it will lead you to choose softness and compassion. If your ego is important to you and you want to be respected, you will potentially allow rigidity to take the forefront, which does not make it good or bad. It just limits the expression that you can hold. And that's where it's not, again, something that a functional adult will have a challenge with. We always know how to meet the adaptive child, harsh, unforgiving, not learning new skills. The non-integrated mind does not manage the emotional stuff that comes up in a way of a grown-up yet, because it's still that raw and vulnerable, which is why it can be looking like anger. It can be looking like a lot of things, spite, revenge, you name it, envy, jealousy. I've seen it all. I've seen many things in my life. I'm only 43. I'm sure I'll see many more of them, but my response has always been the same, which is, let me take a step back, calm the situation. And here, I'm 4'9". My body immediately knows you're gonna lose a physical fight, and that life is important to us in a physical sense. So the only time that social engagement system would not go online for a 5D mystic who's in the Enlightenment Soul Age group is in an actual, am I physically threatened? No? Okay, so it's good to go. And so our integrated mind has that default mode network offline, and we're also in a good relationship with our right mode and our left mode. So when the emotions come up, when my window of welcome or window of tolerance, when my nervous system is doing stuff, for example, I'm always able to work with it and to work with the people around me to the best of my ability, and not to use transference. And when others do transference, it's not a big deal either. Because here's where, if you really have moved into, again, this lovely process of being an infinite higher human consciousness potential person, you will understand humanity, because you are a person. As for our lovely topics coming together, it's beautiful to me to see science and spirituality come together, and the middle, and to see the lovely educators who are opening our minds to more. As for the other ones, I understand how it is when your world is being changed, and it's kind of a challenge. So let's always lead with a compassionate heart. It gives enough room for things to be processed and for love to make its way to every one of us. Have a great day.